Good morning, APUSH. Happy Friday. I am so excited to go through today's lesson. This is one of my personal favorites, and I just find it to be very fascinating and very interesting, so I hope you guys do too. We're going to go ahead and transition. I'm going to share my screen and bring up our PowerPoint for the day. And while I do that, I'm going to make sure that we have everything in front of us that we need. So before we get started today, make sure you have paper as always to take notes on this mini lecture that's going to start off today's lesson. So you should have paper, pen, be prepared to take notes. You should also have access to the YouTube video that you're going to be watching at the end of my video, and as well as access to your classwork document as usual, as we have done the rest of earlier this week. You are taking notes on primary source documents and using those as well as the external information that I am giving you in this lecture, as well as in any external resources to help answer our question of the day, which today is, what caused the Stonewall Riots? So before we do that, we are going to transition into a quick oral drill. As usual, please pause this video and take 4 minutes to review the key terms on this slide. Should be pausing now. Great, everybody should be back. We should have reviewed all of these key terms. I'm super excited to get into today's lesson. And the first thing that we are going to do in today's lesson, let me move my little box over here. So before we get started specifically looking at the Stonewall Riots and the LGBTQIA plus activism of the 1960s, is we need to understand where we're coming from. So what's important to know about this civil rights movement in particular, focusing on LGBTQIA plus rights, is that this is a group that has always been discriminated against, but because of the ability to hide in society, unfortunately, or being marginalized to the point of no visibility. That is why we are unable to really talk about their rights earlier. We do have some understanding of activism earlier in history, but it's in the 1960s where this group really starts to become vocal, and visible is the word that is often used to describe this type of activism. And in order to start, we are going to look firstly at the Lavender Scare. So something to know about the 1950s, so we're stepping back and getting some historical context. In the 1950s, as we know, there was the second Red Scare, which was fueled by Joseph McCarthy, who fueled this fear that government officials were secretly communists the whole time and that they were hiding in plain sight, and that we had to figure out who these secret communist officials were and get them out of office. This same sentiment was pushed towards the LGBTQIA plus community as well. And so McCarthy, along with his allies, also during this time pushed forward the Lavender Scare, which is this fear that there were secret LGBTQIA plus members hiding as government officials. And so anybody that was suspected of being a part of this group was fired simply for being suspected. It was never proven. And so this was often used to either out people who did not want to be out for prejudicial reasons, or they did not want to, or they simply weren't. This term was thrown at them as a way to disparage them and to remove them from the type of public office that they were a part of. So it's important to know. So it's important to know this in the 1950s of how tense and hostile this vocal opposition to this community was, which is going to lead us to some early activism, specifically with the Mattachine Society. So what's important to know is while we look specifically at LGBTQIA plus activism in the 1960s, is that it starts earlier than that. So first we are going to pay our due diligence to the Mattachine Society. It was founded in November of 1950 in Los Angeles, California. And it was founded by a group of gay men who wanted to protect and improve the rights of gay men in Los Angeles. This society became very popular, and it slowly started to splinter into regional factions throughout the United States. So after several years, you could find a Mattachine chapter in New York City, in San Francisco, in Chicago, in Detroit. So while it started in Los Angeles, it did become a nationwide group. And that leads us to our main talking point of the day, the Stonewall Riots. And so what's important to know with the context of the Mattachine Society is that discontent over oppression had been fueling the LGBTQIA+ community for a long time. They were never okay with the oppression that was being pushed towards them. But there's something that happens on June 28th, 1969, where something just snaps. And this goes from very polite and quiet discontent and very civil protest against this oppression. This is when things start to explode, and we see that transition of peaceful protesting or peaceful resistance towards, no, we are going to demand respect and demand acceptance. So on June 28th, 1969, the Stonewall Inn, which was a very popular gay bar in New York City, was raided by the police. The police claimed that they raided it because they suspected illegal activities going in there and that it was controlled by the mafia. What's important to know about the Stonewall Inn is that it was a gay bar, but it specifically catered to those that were the most marginalized in that community. So this includes transgender people. This includes very effeminate men, as well as more masculine women who were not accepted by the more quote unquote like traditional LGBTQIA+ members. So, and again, this is very specific towards the transgender community as well as drag queens, as you will hear in this firsthand account video that you will start shortly. So the police raid this inn, which was very much a safe haven for those who were the most marginalized in this community. And when the Stonewall Inn was raided, they felt as if their home had been raided by the police. And so they decide to fight back. And after the police raid, you start to see groups of the LGBTQIA+ community gathering around the Stonewall Riots and fighting back against the police. And this turns into a riot where this community establishes and demands acceptance from this type of oppression, that their homes cannot be raided by the police. This movement is led by a woman named Sylvia Rivera, who is a transgender Latina activist. And again, that's what's really important about Stonewall, is that it is the most marginalized in this community that is doing its effort to fight back. And what is so important about I know I've been saying all of this is important, but what's very important about the Stonewall Inn is that this becomes the true start of LGBTQIA vocal resistance and activism and pride. The very first pride parades occur 1 year later on the anniversary of the Stonewall Inn riots. And so this is truly that catalyst where more rights agencies for protection are established. This is when pride parades begin. And that is really where we're going to leave off there. One thing that is really interesting to know is that just a few years ago, the Stonewall Inn was actually created established as a national landmark and a national monument. It is very much a pillar in LGBTQIA+ activism. And that's why it's so important to really zero in on and focus on why this evening of June 28th, 1969 is just so important. So I'm now going to transition you guys. This video is going to be in this Google assignment folder, where you are going to hear from a firsthand account from somebody that was actually there, and where he focuses on specifically what this riot looked like, experiencing it firsthand. It's a very interesting video. I'm gonna go and stop my sharing. And if the video for some reason in the link doesn't work, you can also pull it up. The link is in the PowerPoint below. So As usual, you guys are going to be transitioning into watching that video and completing your assignment for the day. You'll notice timestamps on each of the assignments that is in your Google Doc. So I say that you should spend about 5 minutes on the do now, about 15 minutes annotating the documents, about 10 minutes or so completing a chart, and then make sure you complete your thesis and contextualization statement in your exit ticket. That should take about 5 to 7 minutes. So make sure you allocate your time correctly. As always, I will be on Zoom in case you have any questions or concerns about this content and would like to discuss it further. I look forward to seeing you guys and enjoy our final APUSH lesson of our first week of remote learning. See you guys later.